You couldn't even make it to your own father's funeral? That's what my son Jason said, through a forced laugh when I showed up at the will reading in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. The words cut through me sharper than the winter wind outside the courthouse. I took a deep breath, forcing my hands to stay, steady on the polished oak table where his smug face seemed to mock me from. Across the room, I've always been a man of quiet, sacrifices, balancing a small hardware store while raising Jason and his sister Emily. After their mother passed, I spent nights worrying about bills, weekends fixing the leaky roof at our modest Elm Street home, and every holiday working double shifts to keep food on the table. And now Jason, the son I'd worked so hard to guide, had the audacity to prioritize his wife's birthday party over paying respect to the man who gave him life. Before I continue, if you're new here, please like, comment, and subscribe. And tell us where you're watching from. I set my eyes on the envelope containing the final wishes of my late wife, Margaret. The lawyers shuffled papers and glanced at each of us with a practiced neutrality. Yet the air was thick with tension. I could feel Jason's impatience. His knees bounced under the table, his fingers drumming like a child craving attention. His wife, Tiffany, sat beside him, a smug smile that seemed to say, "See? We don't need him. We're untouchable." I remembered back when Margaret and I first bought this house. Cedar Creek wasn't much, but it was ours. I had saved every dollar, negotiated with banks, and sometimes even skipped meals to keep the bills paid. I thought Jason understood the weight of these sacrifices, but he hadn't. Not yet. The lawyer cleared his throat. "Mr. Langston, as executor, you are aware of the contents and stipulations in your wife's will." I nodded slowly, my fingers brushing the wood of the table. Every line of that will had been Margaret's intention, and I'd respected it. Every clause had been carefully written, legally binding, and meticulously documented. I could already feel the sense of vindication rising inside me. Jason leaned closer to Tiffany, whispering, "He's probably going to leave us nothing," he muttered. His arrogance filled the room like smoke, thick and choking. I didn't respond. I just waited. I could see Emily watching quietly from the back. She always had a soft heart, and she knew better than to voice ridicule. But even her quiet concern couldn't stop the sting of betrayal I felt from my own son. That hurt runs deep, the kind you can't shake off with words alone. The lawyer began to read. Assets, properties, small savings accounts. Margaret had thought of everything. And then the final clause, the Elm Street house, the home where I had raised Jason and Emily, was explicitly left to me. Every dollar, every brick, every nail, it was mine. Jason's smug smile faltered. I noticed it immediately. A flicker of confusion crossed his face, quickly masked by the bravado he always used to hide guilt. Tiffany's hand gripped his arm as if to steady him. I swallowed a lump in my throat and allowed myself a small, quiet satisfaction. The house, the savings, the little inheritance, this was my vindication. Jason and Tiffany had assumed entitlement, assumed that absence and mockery would diminish my role. But Margaret had seen the truth, and the truth was now laid bare before them. As the lawyer continued, I felt a calm settle over me. No shouting, no confrontation, just quiet, undeniable justice. Jason's hands clenched into fists under the table, but there was nothing he could do. Margaret's final words had preserved my dignity, and now the consequences of his arrogance would unfold naturally. Yet I knew this wasn't over. The glare from Tiffany's eyes, the whispered threats from Jason as we exited the courthouse, they hinted at battles yet to come. Small-town gossip would rise, whispers about how I had kept the house from my son. And Cedar Creek has a long memory for scandal. But I was ready. I had survived years of disrespect, of being underestimated. I had patience, knowledge, and now the law firmly on my side. The house was mine. The inheritance was mine. And Jason would soon understand that ignoring the sacrifices of a father comes at a steep price. As we walked out into the cold, the wind biting at our coats, I saw Jason's jaw tighten, Tiffany's smug expression fading slightly. I smiled quietly to myself. The game had only just begun, and the first move was undeniably mine. The air felt charged with possibility. This quiet town, the legal system, my own steady patience, they were all pieces in a larger plan, and Jason had no idea what was coming next. The days after the will reading felt strange, almost surreal. Cedar Creek buzzed quietly with curiosity, neighbors whispering as they passed our hardware store. Normally, small-town gossip is harmless, but this time the murmurs carried weight. Everyone knew something had shifted the moment Jason realized he wasn't getting what he thought he was owed. I returned home that evening, the familiar scent of old wood and dust from the Elm Street house filling my lungs. This house was more than a building. It was memory, sacrifice, and love. Margaret had left it to me not out of spite, but out of recognition. The years I had spent keeping the family afloat, raising the children, and protecting what mattered. Jason and Tiffany had mocked me, ignored my role, and yet, here I stood, quietly victorious. That night, Jason called. I didn't pick up. The ring echoed through the quiet rooms, a desperate attempt to regain control, I imagined. Instead, I poured a cup of black coffee, sat by the living room window, and watched the streetlights flicker over the snow-dusted sidewalks. 2 days later, Tiffany appeared at my doorstep. I had been expecting her eventually. The couple had underestimated my resolve. She stepped onto the porch with a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Dad," she began, using the word like a weapon, "Jason says we should discuss the house." I didn't answer immediately. I studied her, noting the sharp edges of entitlement softened slightly by panic. This was not the Tiffany who had sneered at me in the courthouse. This was the one realizing that the rules of the game had changed. "The house is mine," I said evenly, letting the words hang in the cold evening air. Margaret's will made that very clear. Her expression flickered. "We just thought—" "You assumed," I said calmly. "You assumed I wouldn't fight. You assumed the law could be ignored. But assumptions don't change facts, Tiffany." She shifted uncomfortably, glancing behind her as if Jason would appear at any moment to rescue her from reality. "We just didn't realize—" "You didn't realize I knew how to protect what's mine," I replied, my voice low but unwavering. "And you didn't realize how much this town watches, how quickly whispers can turn against those who disrespect family. You thought the inheritance was entitlement? You were wrong. Word spread through Cedar Creek like wildfire. The grocery store cashier mentioned it, neighbors stopped by under the guise of small talk, and the town's lawyer, an old friend, nodded knowingly when I passed him at the diner. The message was clear. Jason and Tiffany had miscalculated. I spent the following week reviewing the property deeds, mortgage documents, and the minor savings accounts that had been part of Margaret's estate. Every signature, every notarization was correct, airtight, leaving no loophole for Jason's arrogant attempts at claiming ownership. It was during these quiet hours that I realized the extent of their entitlement. They hadn't just neglected respect, they had actively tried to manipulate the system. Phone calls from local banks hinted at subtle inquiries they had made, asking if anything could be adjusted. The audacity was breathtaking. One evening, Emily called. "Dad, you handled it so well," she said softly. I didn't want to say anything at the reading, but Jason was livid. "Tiffany is furious. You have no idea how much they're plotting." "I know," I replied, my tone calm. "And that's fine. Let them plot. They don't understand patience, but I do. They'll find out the hard way that respect isn't optional, and consequences aren't negotiable." Emily paused, then added, "Just be careful. They might try to get creative." I smiled faintly. "I've been careful all my life, Emily. I survived their mother's death. I ran the store through bad winters. I managed every challenge. A little family greed doesn't scare me. Yet, beneath that calm exterior, a plan began to form. Patience, observation, and subtle legal maneuvers. That was my strength. They had mocked, ignored, and plotted against me. Now, it was time for the quiet, unstoppable response. The first cracks were already appearing. Jason's arrogance, Tiffany's entitlement, the small-town gossip, all were pieces I could manipulate with precision. And soon, the full weight of justice would bear down on them. The tension in Cedar Creek was palpable. Friends, neighbors, even the local bank manager seemed to anticipate the next move. I had no intention of rushing. Every moment, every small reveal would build toward the moment when Jason and Tiffany understood exactly what it meant to underestimate me. And I knew the tipping point was coming. Soon, the smug smiles would vanish, replaced by shock, fear, and regret. It started with small things: calls from the bank, letters from the county clerk, and whispered conversations at the grocery store. Jason had been asking about refinancing the Elm Street property, trying to claim some loophole that didn't exist. Tiffany had been negotiating with a local contractor, insinuating she might fix up the house before the court formally transferred ownership. Both were playing a dangerous game, thinking I wouldn't notice. But I did. Every phone call, every glance, every half-truth they tried to feed the community only tightened the web around them. I spent evenings at my desk, meticulously cross-checking property records, mortgage documents, and bank statements. I wasn't just protecting an inheritance. I was gathering proof, evidence that would make their scheming crumble. One cold afternoon, the mail brought an unexpected letter, a notice from the Cedar Creek County Court regarding an attempted filing by Jason claiming co-ownership of the property. His signature, forged and clumsy, was easily spotted by the court clerk. I leaned back in my chair, allowing a quiet satisfaction to settle over me. He had overstepped. He had underestimated not just me, but the system I understood better than he ever would. The next day, I called our family lawyer, Martin Hayes, a steady presence in our lives for decades. His office smelled faintly of leather and old coffee, comforting, familiar, reliable. "Martin, they're trying something," I said, sliding the letter across the desk. "Jason's signature on that filing. It's a fake." Martin examined it, his brow furrowing. "He'll try to argue, of course. But handwriting analysis, witness testimony, it's solid. This will not hold." I nodded slowly. "Good. Let's make sure the court knows exactly who's been scheming." "Agreed. And I'd recommend documenting everything else. Phone calls, emails, anything suspicious. We're going to turn their own moves against them." I allowed a small smile. This was exactly the kind of chess match I excelled at. Patient, calculated, methodical. Meanwhile, word in Cedar Creek started trickling back. Neighbors spoke in hushed tones about Jason's frantic calls, Tiffany's tense demeanor, and the couple's mounting frustration. Even the local diner, usually indifferent to personal drama, buzzed with speculation. By now, I had the advantage of perception and patience. Everyone watching this unfold was noticing the cracks forming in their facade. Emily stopped by one afternoon, carrying a tray of cookies. "Dad," she said, hesitating, "I think they're panicking. Tiffany keeps asking around about who might testify, who might know. Jason. He's furious, but clueless." I nodded, taking a cookie. "Let them panic. The more they scramble, the faster they'll expose themselves. Remember, it's not just the law. They can't hide their arrogance, their greed, or their deceit. The whole town sees it now." Emily's eyes were wide. "Are you going to confront them?" I shook my head. "Not yet. Patience. The right moment is key. One misstep from them, one wrong move, and the court, the community, and their own pride will collapse against them. My job is to stay calm and let them do the heavy lifting." In the days that followed, Small victories piled up. A contractor who had been coaxed by Tiffany came forward to testify that she offered misleading statements about ownership. A neighbor recalled seeing Jason sneaking around the property, trying to take measurements without permission. Each little piece of testimony, each overlooked detail, became a brick in the wall of proof against them. I continued my own careful maneuvers. Letters drafted, evidence organized, and conversations recorded when legally permissible. My mind remained focused, calm, steady. I wasn't out for vengeance in the destructive sense. I was seeking justice, poetic in its execution, precise in its impact. One evening, as the sunset bathed the Elm Street house in orange light, I stood on the porch and thought about how much patience matters. I remembered Margaret's advice. Justice doesn't need to be loud. It needs to be certain. Her words echoed through me, and I knew that the culmination of their arrogance was approaching. Jason and Tiffany thought they had control. They thought they were clever. But all along, I had been 3 steps ahead, waiting for the moment their own greed and entitlement would betray them fully. And that moment was drawing near. The courthouse smelled of polished wood and stale coffee, the familiar tang that always reminded me of family disputes, contested wills, and property battles. I walked in early, suit pressed, tie straight, and hands steady. Jason and Tiffany were already there, whispering, trying to appear confident. Their faces betrayed it. They knew something was coming, but they didn't know exactly what. Martin greeted me with a nod. "Everything's in order. The judge has reviewed our filings and wants to hear the witness statements first." I nodded, calming the small knot of anxiety in my chest. This wasn't about intimidation. It was about precision, control, and letting the law reflect the truth. The courtroom door opened, and Jason stepped in, eyes darting around. Tiffany followed, clutching her designer purse like a shield. They sat, whispering urgently. "Your Honor," Martin began, "we have evidence of forged signatures, unauthorized property claims, and witness testimony regarding attempted deception." Jason's face went pale. "This is ridiculous," he muttered under his breath. But the judge didn't flinch. "Mr. Thompson," the judge said, addressing me, "you may proceed." I took a deep breath, letting my voice carry calmly and clearly. "Your Honor, I have lived in Cedar Creek all my life. I raised my children with care, paid my taxes, maintained this property, and respected every legal obligation. When my son and his wife attempted to forge my signature and claim ownership of the Elm Street property, it was not just a breach of law, it was a betrayal of trust. I laid out the evidence, the forged filing, witness statements, bank records, even emails Tiffany had accidentally left unencrypted. Each piece was undeniable. Each fact landed with a weight that made Jason squirm. Then came the handwritten analysis. "Your Honor," Martin continued, "experts have confirmed this signature does not belong to Mr. Thompson. It is a clear forgery." The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Jason Thompson, Ms. Tiffany Thompson, how do you plead?" They exchanged a glance. Jason stammered, I... It's a misunderstanding." Tiffany's lips pressed tight. We thought—" "Silence," the judge interrupted, voice sharp. "The evidence is substantial. Attempts to forge legal documents are taken seriously. This court will not tolerate deceit." Every word from the judge felt like a tide washing away their confidence. Neighbors and townsfolk, packed in the gallery, whispered among themselves. I could feel their judgmental eyes on Jason and Tiffany, the weight of the town's gaze heavier than any legal sentence. I remained calm, letting them squirm, letting the courtroom feel the tension. There was no need for dramatic gestures or theatrics. The law, coupled with truth, was sufficient. Then came the final blow. The judge held the original deed in hand, turning it for all to see. As per the last legally verified documents, Mr. Thompson remains the sole and rightful owner of the Elm Street property. All claims of co-ownership are hereby dismissed. Any attempt to challenge this will result in penalties and potential criminal charges. Jason's face flushed crimson. Tiffany's hands trembled around her purse. Their whispering stopped. Their confidence evaporated. Martin leaned slightly toward me. Patience and preparation. They did this to themselves. I nodded, letting a quiet sense of satisfaction settle over me. This wasn't just about the house. It was about dignity, fairness, and the knowledge that arrogance and deceit cannot survive careful observation and decisive action. Outside the courthouse, the air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine and winter approaching Cedar Creek. I watched as Jason and Tiffany slinked away, their posture defeated, their smiles gone. The town murmured quietly, not with sympathy for them, but with understanding of the truth. Emily approached, eyes shining. "Dad, you did it. They can't touch the house. They can't take what's yours." I placed a hand on her shoulder. "It wasn't about taking, Em. It was about making sure what's mine stays mine, and that justice is seen by all." We walked past the courthouse steps, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows over the square. Jason and Tiffany had underestimated patience, preparation, and integrity, and it had cost them. The Elm Street property remained under my name, my legacy intact. But more than that, the lesson lingered. Arrogance and deceit always leave a trail. And if you wait, observe, and act carefully, the truth will always surface, delivering justice in its own quiet, unyielding way. As I turned the corner toward home, I felt a profound sense of closure, but new life in Cedar Creek would continue, full of whispers, rumors, and the occasional attempted betrayal. But this time, I had proven that calm, calculated action and patience were far more powerful than anger or revenge. And Jason and Tiffany? They would remember this day for the rest of their lives. The streets of Cedar Creek were quieter now, the winter wind weaving through the sidewalks and the small-town shops lining Main Street. I walked slowly toward home, each step deliberate, enjoying the calm after the storm. Jason and Tiffany had vanished from the courthouse steps, their car gone, their arrogance dissolved into shame. It was poetic justice in its purest form. No theatrics, no shouting, just truth prevailing in the right hands. Back at the Elm Street property, the smell of freshly polished wood and clean carpets greeted me. I had spent decades maintaining this house, ensuring it was more than just a roof over my head. It was a symbol of perseverance, sacrifice, and dignity. Now, after the court's ruling, it felt almost sacred, a testament to integrity surviving greed and betrayal. Emily joined me, her hands tucked into her coat pockets, her eyes bright but wary. "Dad, are you okay?" she asked. I smiled softly. "Better than okay. I feel peaceful. They tried to strip me of more than a house. They tried to strip my dignity. But dignity isn't something anyone can take. It's something you earn every day, even when people doubt you." She nodded, and we both sat on the porch steps, listening to the distant hum of the town settling into evening. The crunch of snow beneath passing boots and the faint smell of wood smoke from neighbors' chimneys filled the air. It was ordinary, comforting, and perfectly serene. Later that night, I poured a cup of coffee, the warmth seeping into my hands as I leaned against the kitchen counter. The legal battle, the deceit, the mockery, they were all behind me. And yet, I reflected on how fragile trust can be, even among family. Jason's laughter at the courthouse, his smug confidence, it had been a dagger in my chest. But the law, evidence, and calm preparation had turned it into a lesson he would never forget. Martin stopped by later to return some final paperwork. "Everything is finalized," he said, handing over the signed documents. "They have no legal claim. You're fully protected. You didn't just win a case, you restored your peace." I nodded. "Thank you, Martin." "For everything," he smiled. "You did the hard part. Patience, observation, calm action. They underestimated you. That's their downfall. In the following weeks, Cedar Creek buzzed quietly with gossip. Neighbors whispered about the courtroom confrontation, about Jason and Tiffany's failed attempt to seize the property. I didn't indulge in it. I let the town see the consequences naturally. People admired fairness and integrity, even silently. Emily and I spent evenings tending to the house, checking repairs, and enjoying small victories like hot cocoa by the fireplace. Life, simple and honest, began to feel normal again. The house wasn't just my property, it was my sanctuary, and now, more than ever, it represented resilience. Then came the small but satisfying surprise. Jason's creditors began calling. Tiffany's claims for expenses and alleged contributions were nullified. The house taxes they had hoped I'd pay for them were suddenly their problem. Every system they tried to manipulate came back to bite them. It was a ripple effect of justice. Quiet, yet unmistakable. One Sunday morning, I stood on the front porch, the first snow settling gently over the yard. The silence was profound, broken only by a crow cawing in the distance and the distant chime of the church bell. My thoughts drifted to the events that had passed: betrayal, courtroom battles, mockery, and finally, resolution. It struck me then how fragile pride can be when met with patience and integrity. Jason had believed he could rewrite reality with deceit, but in the end, truth, preparation, and quiet resolve had revealed the only reality that mattered: justice. Emily came out, carrying a tray of steaming mugs. "Dad, you deserve this," she said softly. I accepted the coffee, inhaling its warmth, and looked across the snowy lawn. "Thank you, Em. You know, it's not about winning against them. It's about preserving who you are, no matter what others try to take from you." She smiled. "And you did that. Not just for you, but for all of us." I sipped the coffee, letting the silence envelop me. The house, the property, the name, they were mine. Yes, but more importantly, my dignity, my calm, my peace, they were untouchable. And somewhere in the quiet streets of Cedar Creek, Jason and Tiffany would learn what it meant to underestimate a man who never lost faith in fairness, preparation, and truth. The snow fell steadily, each flake a reminder that time moves on. Seasons change, and justice, even when delayed, is always served. I turned back toward the house, Emily following, and felt an extraordinary sense of closure. My son and his wife had attempted to steal more than a home. They had tried to steal pride, respect, and legacy. And yet, in the end, all they had taken from themselves was their dignity. I stepped inside, the warmth from the fireplace welcoming me. For the first time in months, I could breathe freely, knowing the house and my legacy was secure. Tell us your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories, I said softly, almost as if narrating to an unseen audience, letting the story of patience, preparation, and justice resonate beyond these walls. Peace had returned. The villains had lost, and the legacy, my legacy, remained untarnished.